So this happened when I was 17. I'm 32 now, so make of that what you will. I've changed everyone's names, not because I think we'd actually get in trouble after all these years, but because some things just feel better kept quiet. There's a stretch of land about 20 miles outside of Baton Rouge, Louisiana, right off a back highway that most people blow past without a second thought, where an old military installation used to sit rotting in the swamp. Nobody official ever talked about it. It didn't show up on Google Maps, but if you grew up around there, you knew it existed. We called it the fort. From what people pieced together over the years, the fort had been active during World War II and stayed operational into the early 1960s. At its peak, there were barracks, family housing, a chapel, a medical wing, a whole self-contained community carved out of the Louisiana marsh. Then, sometime around 1967, the government just walked away. Left everything behind. Beds still made. Coffee cups still sitting on tables, according to the people who went in. For almost 4 decades, it sat there decaying in the humidity. Growing up, the fort was the monster under the bed for our whole town. Every kid had a story. By middle school, I'd heard that Satanists used the chapel for rituals, that the government had buried something underneath the medical wing, that there was a woman in a white dress who wandered the property at night, and if she touched you, you'd be dead within a week. The usual stuff. We traded those stories like baseball cards. When I was around 12, my older cousin Danny came over one evening looking shaken in a way I'd never seen before. Danny was 18, big, loud, the kind of guy who thought nothing scared him. He sat down at our kitchen table and told me and my friends that he'd been inside the fort the week before. We didn't believe him. He described the chapel in detail. Said the pews were still lined up in perfect rows. Said there was a trapdoor beside the altar, a heavy wooden door set flush into the floor, and when he pressed his ear to it, he heard something underneath. He said it sounded like someone crying. Not like an animal, a person. He could have been messing with us. Probably was. But I remember the way he kept rubbing his hands together the whole time he was talking, like he was trying to get something off of them for years after that. Me and my closest friends, I'll call them Marcus, Derek, and Cole, said we were going to go there ourselves. We said it constantly. It was always when we're old enough to drive, or when we know exactly where it is, asterisk excuses stacked on top of excuses. Finding the fort was the real problem. We knew the general area, somewhere off Parish Road 12, past the grain elevator, near the old drainage canal. But the whole corridor out there is posted with no trespassing signs, and half of it floods out during heavy rain. We couldn't just cruise around until we stumbled on it. The other problem was that it was technically still federal property, even abandoned. We didn't know what that meant legally. We were 17. Prison felt possible. Then one night in the spring of our senior year, Marcus texted us all and said, "I know how to get in." Asterisk, he'd gotten the information from some older guy he worked with at the gas station, someone who'd gone in years before and sketched a rough map on a paper bag. We met up at Derek's house, looked at the sketch, and argued about whether it was real for about 40 minutes. Finally I said, asterisk, fine, let's go right now, asterisk, because I was 90% sure we'd drive out there, find nothing, and that would finally kill the conversation for good. It was 11 at night, late April. The air was warm and smelled like mud and cut grass. We took my car. Marcus held the paper bag map and navigated. He had me turn off Parish Road 12 onto a gravel path that wasn't even visible from the road, completely swallowed by overgrown brush on both sides. A faded no trespassing sign hung sideways from a wire, half covered in kudzu. The letters were barely readable. We sat there for a moment with the headlights off. "This is it," Marcus said. Cole, who had been quiet the whole drive, said, "I don't want to go in." Marcus and Derek talked him into it. They talked me into it too, by bringing up every conversation we'd had about this place going back to middle school. I put the car in drive and crept forward. The gravel gave way to dirt almost immediately. I killed the headlights and just let the car roll forward in the dark, navigating by moonlight and instinct. About 200 yards in, there was a metal gate arm, the kind you see at parking garages, stretched across the path. No booth, no guard. I got out and lifted it manually. It screeched so loud I thought my heart was going to come out of my chest. Just past the gate, things got strange fast. On both sides of the road there was furniture, just sitting in the weeds like someone had moved out in a hurry. A metal bed frame, a waterlogged dresser, a child's wooden chair sitting perfectly upright in the middle of the tall grass facing the road. That chair stopped all four of us from talking. Another gate arm 50 yards further. I had Marcus get out and lift it. Then we were inside. The fort opened up around us like a neighborhood in a fever dream. Rows of small housing units, maybe 24 of them, lined either side of a cracked main road. Some had collapsed inward. Some were still standing, windows intact like nothing had happened. The chapel sat at the far end of the road, a plain white structure with a short steeple that had tilted a few degrees off center. Weeds grew up the sides of everything. Trees had broken through the asphalt in places. Nobody spoke for a long moment. "It's real," Derek finally said. Cole said again that he wanted to go home. We went to the chapel first. The door wasn't locked. It wasn't even fully on its hinges. We pushed it open and stepped inside. There was graffiti on every surface. Satanic symbols mixed in with high school names and graduation years. The pews were still there, though most were overturned. I looked immediately for what Danny had described, the trapdoor beside the altar. There was no trapdoor. Of course there wasn't. There was a floor drain maybe, but no secret door. We poked around for 15 minutes and left. The housing units were worse, not in terms of damage, but in terms of feel. The ones that had caved in were just sad, but the ones still standing had this quality that I can only describe as asterisk paused. Like whoever lived there stepped out to grab the mail and just never came back. There was still a welcome mat outside one unit, completely rotted through, but the shape of it was still there. We went into 3 or 4 of the units. Cole was losing it the entire time. He kept stopping and saying someone was there, someone was watching us. We kept telling him to relax, that he was just creeped out by the place and his brain was filling in the gaps. That's what I believed at the time. I don't know what I believe now. We were in one of the larger units, a 2-bedroom near the middle of the block, when all 4 of us stopped at the exact same moment. There was a sound above us, not a settling house creak, not the wind. It was rhythmic, deliberate. The sound of weight shifting on old wood flooring, step by step, in the room directly above our heads. Marcus broke the silence first and shouted, "Hello, anybody up there?" Asterisk, the sound stopped. We stood completely still for what felt like 2 full minutes. Nothing. Silence except for crickets and wind. I told everyone we were leaving. Marcus and Derek pushed back, said it was just the structure settling. Cole didn't say anything. He was already moving toward the front door. That's when he stopped and grabbed my arm. He pointed without saying a word at the window on the east wall of the living room. Through the dirty glass in the moonlight, I could see 3 silhouettes moving outside. Slow, deliberate movement, heads and shoulders passing behind the adjacent unit, not animals, people. I stepped to the window as carefully as I could. By the time I got there, the shadows had slipped around the back corner of the neighboring house, out of sight. I turned to the group and mouthed, "Run." Asterisk, we hit the front door and sprinted. The car was maybe 60 yards away. I could hear all of us breathing and the slap of our shoes on the cracked asphalt and nothing else. No shouting from behind us, no footsteps chasing us, which somehow made it worse. Cole was fastest and he reached the car first. He screamed, not a scared yelp. A full, raw scream, the kind that bypasses every social filter and just comes out of you. We looked. Standing at the rear passenger door of my car was a woman, tall. She was wearing a long dark dress that looked genuinely old, not like a costume. The fabric looked heavy and wrong. She had the back door open and had one leg inside the car. She was getting in. When Cole screamed, she looked up. I couldn't make out her face clearly in the dark. She pulled her leg out of the car, released the door, and walked quickly into the chapel. Not ran, walked. Like she had all the time in the world. We reached the car in seconds. I threw it into reverse before Marcus even had his door fully shut and tore back down the dirt path at a speed that was genuinely dangerous. I lost the back end on a soft patch of ground and nearly put us into the tree line. Made it to the gate, blew through it, fishtailed onto the gravel, and didn't stop driving fast until we were back on the highway with streetlights around us. Nobody talked for about 5 minutes. Then we talked for 4 hours. The rational explanation is the one we kept coming back to. Homeless people had been using the fort as shelter. The buildings were intact enough in places. It was isolated. It made sense. People in desperate situations find desperate places. What didn't make sense was the woman and my car. That wasn't someone looking for a place to sleep. That was someone trying to get into a running vehicle with 4 strangers in it. And it didn't make sense that we had walked through that place for almost an hour without seeing a single sign that anyone had been there. No fire pits, no trash, no blankets, nothing. And then in our last 60 seconds, 3 people materialized out of the dark. I've never been able to square that. Cole told me years later that when he first saw the woman at the car, he thought for just a second that she wasn't standing on the ground, that her feet looked wrong, too high, like she was hovering an inch or two above the asphalt. He knows that doesn't make sense. He knows what the dark does to your eyes. He told me anyway. The fort was demolished sometime in the mid-2000s. When I looked it up recently, I found actual records on it for the first time, photographs, military documents, a county historical archive. Growing up, there had been nothing. No digital trail at all. That absence had always made the place feel like it existed slightly outside of reality, and somehow seeing the documentation didn't fully close that feeling. I think about that night every time I'm in a parking lot at night and see someone near my car. My hand goes to the door handle before my brain even registers what I'm reacting to. Cole's reflex was the one that got us out of there. I don't want to think about what we would have found if we'd been 10 seconds slower. So my wife and I have been together for a long time now, but when we first started dating, we were a different kind of stupid. Nothing that hurt anybody, but we did things I'd never do today. One of her big things was exploring abandoned buildings. She was convinced ghosts were real and that if you looked hard enough in the right places, you'd find proof. I didn't believe any of that, still don't really. But I was into her, so I went along with it. We hit a lot of places over the years. Empty warehouses, old farmhouses, a shut-down motel off the interstate. Nothing ever happened that I couldn't explain, except once she found this house through some forum she was on. People posted coordinates to abandoned properties and rated them. This one had a lot of activity in the comments. I remember thinking the whole thing was insane, grown adults trading locations to trespassing spots like it was a hobby, which I guess it was. The house was nowhere near anything. No neighbors, no road noise, no lights from nearby businesses. Just flat land and dark sky, and this structure sitting in the middle of it all that looked like it had given up trying to stand a long time ago. It was one of those overcast nights where the clouds swallow every bit of moon and star, and your flashlight feels almost useless because the dark just swallows everything a few feet out. I'm not someone who scares easy, but I'll be straight with you. I was not comfortable going inside that house. Not because of ghosts, because the thing looked genuinely close to falling down. The roof had partially caved on one side. The porch had rotted through completely. The front door was boarded up with 2 planks of wood nailed in an X pattern, and I had to kick it 3 times before it gave inside. The smell hit first. Mold and something else underneath it, something older and worse. What used to be the living room was mostly gone. The floor had collapsed in the center of the room, leaving this huge jagged hole that dropped straight down to the basement. We shone our flashlights into it and could see water-damaged concrete, a busted water heater, piles of junk that had fallen through over the years. I told her we should leave. She said, "Just wait a minute." That was always her answer. Just wait a minute. Every single time. She started working her way around the edges of the room, testing each floorboard before putting her weight on it, heading toward the back of the house. I stayed by the front door. I told her I wasn't moving because I didn't trust the floor. She called me a coward and kept going. I lasted maybe 3 minutes before my curiosity got the better of me and I followed her. The next room was packed floor to ceiling with junk. Old furniture boxes, garbage bags that had split open and spilled their contents everywhere. She was already digging through it, pulling things out, holding stuff up to her flashlight. That was her thing, looking for personal items, photos, anything that told her about the people who used to live there. I never understood it. Felt like going through a stranger's trash. She told me to check upstairs. I started to say no and she cut me off. Said the sooner we searched the whole place, the sooner we could leave. Which was the only argument that worked on me. The stairs held. I took them slow, one at a time, staying close to the wall where the structure was stronger. At the top was a short hallway with 2 bedrooms, one on each side. I went right first. It was a bedroom. A real one with an actual bed still in it, still made, sheets and everything. A folded bathrobe sitting at the foot of the mattress. It had that feeling that I hate about these places, the feeling that someone just stepped out and never came back. Like life just stopped mid-sentence. I looked around the room. Clothes piled in the corner. Old picture frames with the glass cracked. A nightstand with a drawer hanging open. Nothing worth lingering over. In the far corner of the room there was a crawl space, low to the ground, just a dark opening in the wall. We'd found decent stuff in crawl spaces before: old tools, boxes of photos, things people had specifically hidden away. I crouched down and went in. It was full of baby supplies. Unopened boxes of diapers. Jars of baby food still in a cardboard flat. A folded-up mobile with little plastic animals on it. All of it covered in thick dust and cobwebs, and the baby food jars had been chewed through by rodents at some point. The whole space smelled like rot and something sharp underneath that I couldn't identify. I was about to back out when I heard it creaking. Slow and rhythmic. I swung my flashlight around the crawl space and caught something I'd missed coming in: a second opening at the far end. A narrow passage running sideways, parallel to the length of the house. The creaking was definitely coming from that direction, from the other bedroom. I was too big to fit through the passage, so I backed out of the crawl space, went back into the hallway, and headed toward the second bedroom. The creaking got louder with every step. I told myself raccoons. The whole time I was walking down that hall, I was running through explanations. Raccoons, loose shutter, wind finding its way through a broken window frame. I was ready for any of those things. What I was not ready for was a woman sitting in a rocking chair. The back of the chair was facing the doorway, facing me. I could see the top of her head, white hair, thin, and what looked like a long skirt spread out over her legs. She was rocking slowly, back and forth, completely steady, like she'd been doing it for hours. I didn't say anything. I just stood there. I tried to see her face in the window reflection, but the glass was too dirty and the night outside too dark. I couldn't make out anything. I took one step into the room and the floorboard under my foot screamed. She stopped rocking instantly. I said I was sorry, that we didn't know anyone was living there, that we'd leave right now. I was talking fast, already halfway through an apology, when she just started rocking again. Same pace, same rhythm, like she hadn't heard me at all. Like I wasn't standing 5 feet behind her. I don't know why I didn't run. I still think about that. Instead, I took another step forward and asked if she was okay. She stopped rocking again, then she stood up. She rose slowly, the way very old people do, like every joint was negotiating with her. She stood there in front of the chair with her back still to me, and she made a sound. Not words, a low hum. Tuneless at first and then almost like the beginning of a melody. Then she spun around, not slowly. Fast. Way too fast for someone who just stood up like that. I ran. I didn't think, I just turned and ran back down the hall and down the stairs, shouting for her to go, that we needed to leave, that there was someone upstairs. She laughed at me. I was out of breath, genuinely shaking. Telling her there was a woman in the back bedroom, and she stood there with her arms crossed and laughed. She said I was messing with her. I told her I wasn't, that someone was up there right now, and she said she'd go look herself. I begged her not to. She went anyway. I followed her because I wasn't going to stand alone on that first floor. I watched her go down the hall and stop at the doorway of the back bedroom. I heard her say quietly, "Oh my God." I ran to the doorway. The rocking chair was there, empty, moving slightly like it had just been vacated. No woman, no one in the room at all. She turned around and started laughing again. Asked me if the rocking chair had scared me. Said it was probably moving from a draft. I told her I had seen a woman in that chair 60 seconds ago, and she kept laughing, went into the room, looked in the closet, looked in the crawl space opening, found nothing. She walked past me out of the room and said we could leave. We were both at the top of the stairs when we heard it, the creaking, slow, rhythmic, Coming from the back bedroom, she grabbed my arm. We both stood there and didn't move. The sound continued, steady and even, rocking chair on old wood flooring. Then underneath it, barely audible, the humming. The same low melody I had heard before. She let go of my arm and walked back toward the bedroom. I stayed at the top of the stairs. I watched her get to the doorway and stop. She stood there for a few seconds, not saying anything. Then she turned around and ran, and I was right behind her, both of us down the stairs and through the front door without stopping, across the dead grass to the car. Once the doors were shut, she started shaking. She kept asking what that was, what we had seen, and I didn't have an answer. I wanted to look back at the house as we drove away, look at the upstairs window, see if anyone was standing there watching us leave. I didn't look back. The most logical answer is that an extremely old woman was living in that house. People do end up in situations like that. Isolated, no family, nowhere else to go. Maybe she'd been there so long she'd stopped registering outsiders as a threat, but the door had been boarded up from the outside, and there was a hole in the living room floor the size of a dining table. And we had been in that house for a while before I went upstairs, long enough that anyone living there would have heard us. She hadn't made a sound until I was already in the room with her, and the way she turned around. That's the part I keep coming back to. A few years ago, I brought it up with my wife and we drove back out to find the place. There was nothing there. Not the house, not the foundation, not even the outline in the dirt of where it had stood. Just flat, empty land. We sat in the car for a minute looking at the spot. She said, "I don't know what that was." And that was enough for me. Because she had spent years laughing at me about that night, and she never laughed about it again after that drive.